Okay, on decolonizing love, an important part of my Black Love series. First of all, I want to ask you guys, have you seen Black Mirror? First of all, if you watched it, I wanted to ask if you remember that episode where there is this game creator. He's a co-founder of a company that creates virtual reality games, and in his office he's like very shy, very timid, very introverted, and he has all these colleagues that he has hang-ups with, and he creates this other reality, this other virtual reality, in which he takes their DNA and he forces them into his reality, this virtual reality, in which he is the king, the ruler of this reality, and forces them to live in his fantasy, to do things according to what he wants them to do. In this reality, he's the king. In real life, he's not the king. He's like he's not the king. He's just a very sad character. But he creates this alter universe where he forces all these people that don't treat him right or give him respect, or people he has crushes on in his office, and forces them to act accordingly in this reality that he creates for them. Now, why am I talking about this? Because I think that is a great metaphor for what colonization is. Basically, as colonized people, we live in a reality that is not really our reality. It's a reality created by a people, a small amount of people that literally has compromised the majority of people's lives because we are forced into this reality. But unlike this theory, of course, we have more power of changing our reality or even signing out of this reality than the people in this series, because our reality is a reality that works upon agreement. It's a sort of agreed upon reality. I'm not saying that everything that happens to us, like, oh, do you guys want to do this? I'm going to say yes, no. But it's a reality that it needs our collaboration, and needs us to be and keep creating that reality in which we are not only the oppressed but constantly hopeless, constantly devaluing ourselves and our contributions to the overall world. And also it's a reality that forces us to live in limitation to what the creator of that reality lives in limitation of, and in the fears that they live in, and the aspirations that they have, and in the philosophies that they have made up. So our reality is then compromised. Mentally, we are enslaved into a reality that doesn't have to be our reality if we realize our own power, and how every day through what we choose to engage with or be a part of or support, or even the way we think, we are either signing into that reality, or even reflecting on it, or even rejecting it as not our reality, or not necessarily what our reality has to be. And for me, decolonization is a tool I use in my everyday life to reflect on my reality and question whether it's my reality or someone else's reality, and whether if things happen in my reality, that I have the power to sometimes say. Of course, there's some places where you're like, look, I actually don't feel like I have the power to do much about this, but you can always have the power over your mind and how you see stuff and what you think about them. I like Audre Lorde's saying or quote, which is a big part of how I live my life, which is, one of the ways people give away their power is by thinking they don't have any. In whatever situation you're in life, you have some sort of power, even if maybe it's not on your physical world, but on your spiritual world, on your mental world. And if you know that, you will always be empowered in whatever situation you're in to know, okay, this is how it is, but what can I do to go from here to something better? And I think when it comes to love, that is a practice we also have to use. I wrote down a few questions or reflections that we can use to reflect and be aware of the reality we love in, because it's not our reality, most of it. Most of it is a reality forced down on us. It's a reality that we are constantly being told is the only reality, when in actuality there's so many ways of living and loving and being happy than the reality that is forced down on us, that it's the reality of the colonizer. And so we should take that upon ourselves to reflect on it. So Some things that you can ask yourself in any relationship you're in. For example, ask yourself why you really love this person, and know, is it because of things that actually matter to you, or is it because of things that society, or in this sense the colonized reality, has forced down on you? Why do you love the person you are in? How you are motivated to love them, is that the same way you would want someone else to be motivated to love you? Now we can also reflect on anti-blackness when it comes to this. Are you attracted to this person because of the things in you that you cannot accept about yourself, and are you using them as a form of escape from yourself? Or sometimes, are you loving someone to reinforce or replay the reality you grew up in as a child, with unhealthy love, and you're using this as a way perhaps to get a different outcome? So you're literally in relationships that are detrimental to you, but you're hoping that you can save people through staying with them, or through loving them, or through compromising your own values and your own identity, and hoping that you can save the person you were as a little person, as a little child, that you couldn't save. So those are things that are important for us to think about, especially in the reality that we grew up in, because most of us, unfortunately, being from a colonized heritage, don't always grow up in the most healthy models of love, in houses that model the most healthy forms of love. Now we talked about modeled. Another thing to ask ourselves is, who has modeled the love I believe in today? In many countries, even post-colonial, the reality, like I said, is still the colonial dream, or the colonial traces that are left behind. And so I think about that also when we talk about love, in a sense of, if we are watching all these movies, or reading all these novels, or caring about the way, the structure of love, even like love or romantic love, the fact that I have to say platonic love or just communal love, because love for us, when we think about that, we think only about romantic love and only heterosexual love. And there is more ways to love than that. Like I said in my video when I was introducing the Black Love series, like talking about platonic love, communal love, brotherly love, sisterly love. There's so many ways for us to express love rather than this main focus. And because the Eurocentric worldview works on a hierarchy, it always puts everything in a hierarchy. Even love has a hierarchy. This is the most basic, important love, and everything is kind of in the background. The roles of our grandparents are in the background in the Eurocentric perspective, of our extended family are in the background in the European perspective. But if we go more to indigenous way of loving, it's more communal. There's enough to go around. It comes from a place of abundance rather than a place of scarcity, where I'll love, oh, I only love this person, and then we're going to create some babies, and then this is going to be family. No, family is much bigger than that. I remember when I was younger and I'd walk on the streets in Copenhagen, and sometimes like some black men, usually black men more than black women, African women or African men, would come to me and say, oh, hey sister, hey sister. And this was something that in the beginning, because of I was working on my own ways of integrating into a new society and becoming seamlessly a part of this society, which is impossible without you becoming anti-black and trying to get rid of what you are, because it was a white society. I'd often wonder, why do they say that? We're not related. Why do they call me sister and brother? I'm not that family. Or even how your mom has friends or your father has friends and say, this is uncle, this is, but it's not blood related. But it's just the way we see family. It's more expansive than the European way of seeing family, which is more nuclear, small, but we see things on a more holistic, bigger part. So we have this saying, it takes a village to raise a child, and therefore it also takes a village to change the lives of people, to enforce liberation and empowerment. And so for me, when I think about that, I also think about the ways that we mimic the shame that white supremacy has in its societies. For example, there is the shame, and then we just multiply it in our own society. For example, shaming people for being, like, say, single mothers, or I'm not going to say single dad because those are not always shamed, they're more applauded, for being amazing parents because they stayed with their kids. Oh, you're so great. But single mothers are shamed because of things they're not in control of most of the time. You can't force somebody to stay with you. And I'm not saying that women are always left. Maybe some situation they leave someone, but the idea that we shame people just because somebody is not in the picture anymore. And other ways, like having children out of wedlock. This is also a shame that we inherit from the Eurocentric way of seeing the world, and also from the Abraham faiths, that tell us that you can only make children within this context of like when you're married. But when we think about it, if you're going to create life like really on a natural perspective, why do you need to have a ring and sign a paper? Like, what does that change in the dynamic of your family? It's because we live in reality that's compromised by Eurocentric values and philosophy that we feel like we cannot have kids in any way unshamefully outside of these structures. I'm not even saying that, of course, in before colonization, people didn't have rituals of marriage, so to say, of union, but it wasn't at the extent that we have them now. And I think a lot of the shame we have is very religious focused. It's this idea that shame on you for having sex out of marriage. It's still a part of our communities, especially in Africa. But also I see here in Brazil, like this idea that the only right children to have are children within wedlock, and therefore a child, like for example, me and my sisters, we are bastards, not to put my mom's and father's business out in the streets, but we're apparently bastard children. I remember like realizing that because we go to church and they'll talk about all these things, and then when does, and I was like, Mom, are we bastard children? Because we were born out of wedlock. But does that make us any less of people? And imagine telling that to a child that your existence, number one, is not complete because your parents are not married. But then, of course, then my mom goes on and she raises up by herself, because if she was to raise us with my father, we would have been in an unhealthy home for the rest of our lives. And she chose to rather be a single mom but raise her kids in a healthy home than to be in a youth, even though her whole community was against that. And it's the same actually for my partner's family. Even though his father figure was not really showing the most healthy form of love to his mother, the community, the church she went to, was still like telling her to stick it out, just stay there. And it goes to the point where we're like, is it more important for us to look a certain way than to have things that actually matter to us, which is peace of mind, which is a home full of love and harmony, a home full of happiness. And that doesn't necessarily have to be packaged in this way or that way. But the Eurocentric way of seeing the world, everything is kind of created black and white. Today we see the European countries as progressive and advanced because they're tolerant of this, or tolerant of that, or tolerant of that, and we are not remembering why we are so intolerant of so many things that they now are so tolerant of, because they came down and they forced all these ways of seeing the world on us, whether it was homophobia, sexism. Like I remember I also did a video where I was talking about how colonialism through the dividing of labor, which was based on the European way of living, that men did this and women did this, actually enforced ways, gender roles and sexism that didn't previously exist in these African countries. And so when we look at that and we just think, oh no, that is the righteous way to have love, we are limiting our way of thinking, we have limited our way of liberation, because we are saying we will be happy and a progressive if we are like what we were taught to be, not necessarily what we need right now. For example, you can say, ideally, if I have a baby with my partner, I hope we stay together and raise this baby forever together, these babies, because they deserve to be with their creators as mother and father. But at the same time, if anything happens where we cannot be together, which I hope never happens, but if it happens, I'm not going to go around thinking, oh, my kids are going to be incomplete, or my kids are going to be, because no, I'm going to look for great role models for them, and they'll still have their father because he'll still be in their life, or they'll have uncles, or they'll have cousins, or they'll have, great uncles and so on. So there's so many ways where you can still give your child, where you can still share your love in a different way and create love in communities that doesn't have to be limited to your Eurocentric model of love. And when we limit ourselves to that and we shame our own people because they cannot be in those frameworks, even though we know the context of our existence, that didn't create the best models for us to have all of those things. And also perhaps it's not what we need. What we need is healthy, well-adjusted, loved people. That is the most important thing. I don't care if you came from this family or that family, from a same loving gender family. It doesn't really matter, but we're so focused on the packaging that we don't really care about what's in the package. And that for me is much more important than everything else. So another thing that we can ask ourselves is your love mutually beneficial? And this is important because when you see the model of colonization, it's about exploitation. It's about one person or a few people getting the most out of a relationship or an interaction, because colonization wasn't a relationship, more like a forced interaction with people. But when we see colonization, people coming, for example, to Africa to colonize land, to exploit it, it's based on exploitation. And when you see the gender roles in the Western societies previous to feminism or the rights of women, it was also based on exploitation. Even our business models are based on exploitation. So a lot of our forms of relationships are based on exploitation. And when we take that into love, we might have to ask ourselves, is my relationship with this person mutually beneficial? Am I the exploiter or is the person an exploiter? And if we do see traits of this, how do we address them in each other? Asking, having dialogue and communication and saying, I need you to do more of this, and I think I need to do more of this, so that we can be equally happy in this relationship. So it's not a win-lose situation, but a win-win situation. Even if you're loving someone who does stuff for you that benefit you, but you know they're doing it to a degree that is detrimental to them. And that is also something that's important to be aware of too. If you are creating a love that is supposed to be healing and liberating of all the people involved in it, to say that I appreciate that you do all this and I appreciate that you're always there, but I fear that you're not actually spending a lot of time taking care of yourself and your needs when you do all of these wonderful things for me. And can we do that differently, where you also are replenished, and where you also have self-care and time to take care of yourself and time to love on yourself, you know? That is also love that is aware, that is love that is not there to exploit, but to contribute, to heal, to empower. Also, another thing we can reflect on is loving from a place of compassionate exchange. And I wanted to talk about this part. Now I'm going to use mostly the heterosexual love as the model for this. For example, in the Eurocentric worldview, now why we had the whole women's rights like in Europe and other Western world. In the Eurocentric worldview, of course, that is created by hierarchy, and the most powerful at the top, and they have the power to rule everybody at the bottom, or everybody they see in their reality as the bottom, because in reality we all walk on the same surface of the earth, so nobody's above nobody. It's a reality, it's an illusion that we have to be like, you know, almost brainwashed to believe in, that there is this thing, but we're all on the same ground field. Nobody's levitating. Anyway, so in that regard, there's also the talk about the sexes, because in the Eurocentric worldview, power means the opportunity for oppression and ownership of that less powerful. That applies to nature, to animals, and to people. But in a more holistic way of saying power is supposed to come with a sense of responsibility. Whatever you have power in gives you the responsibility to use that power consciously, and hopefully in the realm of love, to use it lovingly and compassionately. So whatever power you have, you can either use it as a form of distraction in your relationships, as say, for example, if you're violent and you are the physically stronger partner, and using that as a way to disempower the people you love and to get them to submit to your will and your way of seeing the world. that is much like what colonization is, basically. So you are the colonizer in your relationship, and that doesn't only necessarily have to be physical power, but there's also mental power, mental power, emotional power, and so on, even words like talking power. And so I believe that words are powerful things, and how you talk to people, what you say to them, is the difference between somebody leaving your presence more uplifted and empowered, and leaving your presence more disheartened and hopeless, and disempowered. So that is also a power that comes with responsibility. If you have the power, the more feminine power, which is the emotional and so on, emotional awareness, nurturing and so on, you also have the power to use that either for the empowerment of the relationships you have in your life, or to the detriment of the relationships you have in your life. And to not see it as a form of hierarchy. We have complementary differences that are supposed to create more holistic relationships when they come together, rather than relationships of dominance, which is more the Eurocentric worldview, that wherever there is power, it means dominance. But actually power comes with responsibility, and that responsibility hopefully should be used for the better good of all involved. Basically, that's what I wrote down. Of course, there's so much more you can talk about this in the many ways that our love is colonized. Anyway, guys, this is a long video, but I hope you got things from it that can inspire you and help you reflect on your love. If there's things I've missed, let me know in the comment section. But otherwise, I hope whatever love you're in, it's a love that makes you a better person. It's a love that fills you with peace and empowerment, a love that fills you with strength, that makes you feel like you can do the things you were put on this earth to do, whatever that might be. And a love that is willing to make space for the people that give you that love as well. Remember to be kind-hearted, to be aware and reflective, and also, of course, as always, but to not take any shit from people for supporting my channel, and for all the wonderful and kind things you say to me on my channel and share with me. And I'll see you, of course, in my next video. Bye! Sense that we are all women. Yes, we are all women, but we experience oppression on different spectrums. And those different spectrum, if we're really interested in the liberation of all people, you'd want to know, how does oppression affect you specifically?